All right, so welcome to this deep dive into Pascal's wager. And I mean, you've given us a really interesting set of sources this time, covering Blaise Pascal himself, his life, his
Yeah.
writings.
And of course, the wager itself.
Yeah, which people are still debating centuries later. It's amazing.
It really is. I mean, just this basic premise that it's safer to believe in God just in case than to risk eternal damnation.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate what if, right? Like, what if we're wrong? What if there's a heaven and a hell and we picked the wrong team?
Exactly. And Pascal frames it not just as blind faith, but as this kind of calculated
Like a
risk.
gambler weighing their
Yeah,
options.
essentially, he boils it down to this.
Yeah.
We don't know for sure if God exists, right? So believing is a bet with a potentially infinite reward,
Hmm.
but not believing, well, that risks infinite loss.
Okay, high stakes then.
Yeah.
So to unpack all this, we've got, like you said, stuff on Pascal's life, his actual writings, even some criticisms of the wager. To make it even more fun, though, let's pretend we've got some guests joining us. What do you think?
I'm game. Who did you have in mind?
All right, so let's say Socrates is here. Joe Rogan, obviously got to have Kanye West.
Okay, interesting mix.
Oh, and to spice things up, Nietzsche.
Oh boy. This is gonna be good.
Just a thought experiment, of course.
Yeah.
But I think it could help us look at the wager from all these different angles.
I like it. So before our guests jump in, should we set the stage a bit?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So Blaise Pascal, 17th century, brilliant guy, mathematician, physicist, philosopher, but also like super religious.
And from what I've read, those different parts of him really fed into each other.
Right. And his own life had a huge impact on his thinking too, didn't it?
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Like in 1654, he had this super intense religious experience, even wrote about it on this piece of parchment and wore it like an amulet.
Wow. So this wasn't just theoretical for him.
No way.
Yeah.
And this experience led him to get involved with the Jansenists.
The what now?
The Jansenist Catholic movement, super strict on morality, and they believed in predestination.
Which is that whole idea that God already decided who's saved and who's not, right?
Exactly. So if that's true, where does free will fit in? And does Pascal's wager even matter?
Right. Like if it's all predetermined, what's the point of choosing to believe?
And that gets to the core of the paradox Pascal was trying to address. He knew reason had limits. We can't logically prove or disprove God.
So that's where the leap of faith comes in.
But where does reason fit into that? I mean, imagine Socrates here. He'd be all about logic and reasoned argument.
Oh, yeah. Socrates would be pushing back hard, I bet. Could he even accept a wager based on potential outcomes, not like rock-solid truth?
It'd be a good debate. So what do you think Pascal would say to that?
Well, from what I'm seeing in the sources, he argues that there are other ways to get to truth besides just pure logic.
Okay, so not just cold, hard facts.
Right. More like intuition, personal experience, those aha moments that hit you, even if you can't explain why.
And Pascal himself used his own religious experience as proof of that.
Exactly. Like he had that firsthand knowledge that went beyond what you can figure out with just your brain.
And I think that's where Joe Rogan would jump in. He's all about those big existential questions, the stuff science can't totally explain.
Oh, 100%. Rogan would be fascinated by Pascal, like the OG cosmic gambler.
Yeah, I can see that. Always pushing the boundaries, exploring the unknown, just like Pascal was doing back in his day.
But then you've got Kanye. I don't think he'd buy into this whole gambling metaphor.
Yeah, what would Kanye say? I don't gamble, I create. Something like that.
Exactly. But there's something interesting there, right? Like Kanye's drive to create, to be in control, to shape his own world. It kind of echoes Pascal's idea that humans aren't meant to just exist. We're meant for something more.
So for Kanye, the wager isn't about some preset fate. It's about making your own heaven on earth.
I like that.
It just goes to show there are so many ways to think about Pascal's wager. It's not a one-size-fits-all answer, but more like a framework for tackling these huge questions about life and existence. But then you've got Nietzsche. I don't think he'd be too impressed with Pascal's wager.
Oh, yeah. Nietzsche, the will to power guy. He'd probably call it a cop-out, surrendering to weakness.
Exactly. Like we're giving up on our human ability to create meaning, even if the universe doesn't hand it to us.
Nietzsche would say we got to face the abyss head on. No comforting faith to soften the blow.
Right, for him, the real gamble is living a life true to yourself, creating your own values, not relying on some higher power.
So it's like self-creation versus divine submission.
And that contrast, I think, shows us something important about Pascal's wager. It's not just a logic puzzle. It comes from this deep awareness of how vulnerable we are as humans.
Right. Pascal totally gets that we're these fragile beings, capable of amazing things, but also prone to doubt and despair.
He doesn't shy away from that. He even uses words like wretched and miserable to describe humans.
Which kind of brings us back to the wager as this ultimate risk-reward scenario.
Yeah.
Pascal says even if we can't prove God exists, it's smarter to bet on the possibility of infinite good than to risk infinite bad.
And he goes deeper than that, too. He's interested in the psychology of belief, how it works.
Not just saying I believe, but really feeling it.
Exactly. He knew faith isn't just about intellectual agreement. It's about cultivating habits, doing things that reinforce your belief.
Okay, so it's about living that belief, not just thinking about it.
Right. He even said sometimes you have to act as if you already believe.
Like fake it till you make it, but with eternal consequences.
Yeah, and that's where some people get tripped up. They say that's just wishful thinking, ignoring the need for proof.
Like Pascal saying, just pretend hard enough and it'll be true, but with salvation at stake.
And that raises some tricky ethical questions. Can you really force yourself to believe something just because the payoff might be huge?
Right, and even if you could, what does that say about faith itself? Is it just a bet we make, or is it something deeper, more genuine?
Those are tough ones, and I think they show us that Pascal's wager isn't just about being logical. It's a thought experiment, a way to wrestle with the fact that we don't have all the answers.
It makes you ask, what are you willing to gamble on? What do you truly believe and why?
And those questions are just as important now as they were back then. We live in this world where science and tech have taught us so much, but the big existential questions are still out there.
So we've really dug into this whole Pascal's wager thing, huh? Looked at the logic of it. Imagine how different people would react. And what strikes me is how relevant this still feels, even though it's from way back when.
It's not just some dusty old idea. It speaks to something really fundamental about being human.
Yeah, like faith and reason, how we search for meaning when the world feels kind of crazy and unpredictable.
And it's not giving us a simple answer either.
More like a challenge, right?
Yeah.
To really think about what we believe and why.
Exactly. It makes you ask yourself, okay, why do I believe this stuff? Is it because of proof logic, personal experience, fear, hope, or maybe a mix of everything?
Right. And thinking about our imaginary guest, I think they each highlight a different piece of the puzzle. Like Socrates, the logic guy, he'd probably have a hard time with faith being a calculated risk.
While Joe Rogan, with his open mind and love of exploring the unknown, he might see it as this awesome thought experiment.
And Kanye. Kanye would turn it into a call to action. Don't just accept fate. Create your own reality.
Huh. Yeah, he might say something like that. And then Nietzsche, he'd probably push us to face the void without the comfort of believing in something bigger.
So many different ways to look at it. So for us, living in the 21st century, is Pascal's wager a bet we're willing to make?
I think Pascal would say that's up to each of us to decide. He wasn't trying to force anyone to believe anything, but he wanted us to be honest about what we believe and why.
To think critically about it.
Exactly, and to admit that even with all our science and tech, there's still things we can't fully explain with logic alone.
So it's not like a math equation proving God exists. It's more like a mirror reflecting our own hopes, fears, and doubts.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And maybe by wrestling with this idea, we discover something new about ourselves, about our place in the universe, about what it means to have faith or to doubt, to search for meaning.
Maybe that's the real wager. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Pascal's wager. It's been a wild ride exploring these timeless questions about faith, reason, and what it means to be human.